Hello, everyone. We are delighted to welcome you all to yet another webinar in the Sustainable Action Dialogue series being hosted by the Institute of Sustainability Studies. My name is Nazia Hussain. I'm the product manager at ISS. These webinars are being held with the objective of removing the jargon that is often associated with sustainability topics and holding focused discussions on content that can really help businesses and individuals realign commitment with action. And today, I'm delighted to have all of you present for an exclusive webinar on crafting impactful messages, engaging stakeholders for a sustainable future. It's being delivered by Sarah Blake, who is the sustainability consultant at Earthology. She's the founder of Earthology as well and has had more than 25 years of business experience in human resources, horticulture, and sustainability. I'm delighted that she's here today. She's helped more than 20 companies with B Corp certification, and she runs a certified carbon literacy course to educate and inspire both senior leaders and green teams. So really happy to have Sarah join us today. Before I invite her to deliver today's session, I would just like to inform everyone that you can use the LinkedIn comment section to drop any questions, comments, thoughts that you may have, and I will get Sarah to answering them towards the end of the session. Over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Nazia. Delighted as always to join these calls and to hopefully impart a bit of knowledge. If the audience is not in holiday mode, as it seems that most of Europe definitely is, so welcome. If you are going on holiday, been on holiday, welcome back, and we hope you enjoy this. So today we're going to be talking about engaging your stakeholders essentially, and the different ways in which we can do that. And we'll be doing something specific for the alumni next week. So it's going to be a brief whistle stop tour, so we won't keep it too long, probably 20-25 minutes. And today we're going to be talking about effective stakeholder engagement strategies, crafting compelling messages, and general communication when it comes to sustainability, which if you're in sustainability, you're going to know how hard this is to engage the people that we really need to make those changes. So, Mother Teresa, I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the water to create many ripples. She was a wise lady. But essentially, what we're saying is every conversation that you have with somebody that changes their mind about solar panels, about renewable energy, about plastic-free shopping, about changing how they work, how they look at carbon emissions, any of those conversations that you have will ripple out. And so it's always important to keep positive rather than negative. What we have discovered in the last 10 years is that the negative polar bear stories on ice caps are not working. And we really need to change the narrative when it comes to sustainability and changing it to a positive one, because we are hardwired, our brains are hardwired to see that negativity. We really need to switch it up now and look at positive rather than negative when it comes to sustainability and communicating. So if you can bear that in mind throughout the presentation, that's what we're certainly trying to focus on. So the first point in terms of engaging those stakeholders, right? We're going to break it down. So we're talking about identifying those stakeholders and connecting with them, then actively involving them, and then supporting them. So these are the kind of three key things when it comes to your stakeholders to bear in mind. So first of all, you may or may not know who your stakeholders are. You may presume that, when we're talking about crafting these compelling messages, that we're talking about engaging your employees, or you may think about it from engaging your clients, or you may think about it from a point of view of engaging your supply chain. We want you to think about it from the point of view of engaging all of your stakeholders. So that could be your employees, your customers, your suppliers, the whole ecosystem of people that may be your touch points when it comes to communicating sustainability. And as Nazia said, I am a fan of B Corp. It has its holes, but it's pretty good and a pretty good, robust system. I actually just sat with a client this morning who is slowly watching her score come up towards the 80 mark. And she said, gosh, points are always very hard won. in the B Corp impact assessment. And it's a really good way of, it's free to use, and you can look at it and use it to identify who your stakeholders are, because it looks at those people in the supply chain, it looks at your clients, it looks at your customers, it looks at your workers, looks at the whole remit. And obviously, if you think about it, everyone's needs are different. So what your suppliers are going to need in terms of education, and here comes CSRD, and what's ISO 14001, and have they brought in the UN SDGs, and where's the points, where's the touch points with all these different people. If you're in a restaurant business, you know, your customers are probably coming at it from what's the provenance of your food, what is there sustainable packaging, just really depends. And that's the key thing here. I think what's happened in the past is we have used a very broad brush approach when it comes to sustainability. And what we really need to do is get targeted in on those people and what drives them and what they think about. So how do we actively involve them? And a key thing here, and I think we talked about it actually on one of the last webinars, is to be a guide. We don't want to be an educator or a writer or a cheerleader. We don't want to be somebody who is, you know, throwing it at them all the time, telling them what they can and can't do, because that just makes people completely turn off. Definitely from a neuro pathway point of view, right? We don't like it when people tell us what we can and can't do. It's a definite no-no. So think about being a guide to those people. You're going to show them the way and let them come to the decisions by themselves. So you need to start with the warm, fuzzy feeling people first, right? You want those people that are already 1 foot in. They're already talking about their reusable cups. They're already talking about the deposit and return scheme. They're already talking about their electric car that they just bought, you know, those kind of things. The people who are on the green team, the people who want to be on the green team, and those suppliers that are already doing a little bit, but maybe need to do a little bit more. And you're going to need to look at it from the top down in terms of management, and then the bottom up in terms of employees, because you need it to filter from both ways. And like any good strategy, you need to have that senior management buy-in. So think about what the senior leaders want. They want to avoid, you know, they want to mitigate risk. They want to gain more profit. That's pretty much going to be their focus. Whereas the employees, they want a better place to work, they want a pension, they want to be minded, they want flexibility, all of those things. So you need to think about it from all of those different angles. So give the stakeholders the tools to be involved. So start sending them surveys that asks their opinion. Now, some people push back on this, like, why would I do that? Because if I ask for someone's opinion, they're probably going to give it to me and I mightn't like it. So we have definitely found that with some of our clients who are not keen to do that. They don't want to have the wrath, if you like, of the person that may not be very happy. But essentially, again, this comes back to a B Corp framework, is that actually when you start asking people, they feel genuinely that their opinion is being heard, and then they become more involved. So if you start giving them the tools to engage, you will get that back. And I had to put this in there from Peter Drucker, but it really is true. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you don't have the right communications and the right tools for people to engage in sustainability, if they feel like it's a silo, it's not part of overall leadership values, etc., then you're not going to get any traction on your strategy, because people are going to be like, well, there's no point in doing that. Why should I be measuring the waste output, for example, you know, if no one's going to take any interest, or if it just ends up as a statistic, and plus I don't like the way we do it. So it's important for people to be involved in the tasks that they're going to be doing. Well, how would be the best way that we should do this? You actively involve them and ask them for their opinion, and then you support them. So I put a couple of kind of educational tools up here. As Nazia said, I use carbon literacy. We have a couple of courses accredited. We write courses very specifically for organizations, very specific to them. But you can get involved in Climate Fresk. I know there's a couple of Climate Freskers maybe on this call as well. That's a really great one to do, because it's all in a kind of you're involved and you're asking people. It's a generally face-to-face, you can do it online, and then Vira. So that's the kind of big enterprise solution where everybody can get involved in and engaged. And of course, we couldn't be missing out the Institute of Sustainability Studies, because that is a brilliant way. And even one client asked me today already about that. How can I upskill? And the Institute of Sustainability Studies is one of those. So I had to get it in there. So if you give people the tools and support them on their journey, then they're more likely to be involved. So for example, in carbon literacy, what people do is they make pledges to reduce carbon. If they have to work out that calculation, how much will I reduce carbon if I delete my inbox? How much will I reduce carbon if I cycle or walk to work instead of taking the car? Those kind of things. So you're actively getting people to really think about the fact that they can actually have a difference, make a difference, and really see where they can draw down emissions for the company as a whole. And this goes for suppliers too, right? So if you're doing B Corp, you can talk to them about B Corp certification. You can talk to them about what your own actions are as a business, and see if you can bring them along the journey that way. But, again, like I said, it's two very different situations depending on who you're talking to. So this is a really good Rumi quote. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself. So I think this resonates particularly with me, because for the last 10, 15 years, I have definitely wanted to change the world. And I have thought, why are people not changing, right? And then what I realized, I need to change myself. I need to change the way I communicate. I need to change the way I message with people. I need to think about the behavioral change side of things. I need to think about the neural pathways that it takes when you have leadership change, like changing any of our habits. Let's just say, right, it's like cycling anywhere. And maybe you're terrified of cycling in the city centre, as anybody would be. I was already preconditioned to cycle in the city centre because I had moved here from Holland, where if you don't cycle, people think you're crazy. So I already came here with the preconditioning in my head that in order to get about the city, the best way was going to be to cycle. And indeed, I know quite a few clients now who have bikes to get their various products and services around the city, because it turns out to be the quickest way. But if you haven't done that yourself, you don't know how difficult or hard it's going to be. What happens when it rains? Do I have to have wet gear? All these things stop people from making that change, because they don't see maybe somebody doing it that looks like them, modeling that behavior, all those societal norms. So think about yourself and how you communicate before you think about maybe what you're actually going to do. And something that we're going to do a deep dive on the workshop next week is we're going to look at the inner development goals. You can see behind me, hopefully, the UN SDGs. The inner development goals are the skills that we need as leaders and change makers to really affect the change that we need for the next 20 or 30 years. So crafting those compelling messages. So we're going to look at why messages don't resonate with people, and then we're going to look at trust. So we'll start with why messages don't resonate, and have the little picture here of the dog, because we say we're all ears, but actually, are we really practicing that kind of coaching mindset of active listening? So there are a couple of things that you should note. And this is from the brilliant Livy Drake, who does amazing courses on behavioral change. And I highly recommend you look her up. So she's written a couple of posts, but this one particularly really resonated with me. And I've done lots of her courses. So it's information deficit. So it's making sure that you have the information when you need it. So if we get the information when we need it, so let's just say we're talking about when you want to start an initiative or whatever, and you decide that you just want to tell people we're switching to coffee cups, whatever it might be, And so you just put it out there. We're switching to coffee cups. Everyone's having, we're not going to do reusables, disposables anymore. Let's just go with that. Unfortunately, that information deficit, it's like, well, actually, did you give them all the information in terms of where to bring the cup, where to get cleaned? Do they put it in the dishwasher? What happens to the cups? How does, what, you can't just expect people to change without giving them the full piece of information. The next thing is inattentional blindness. This is one that really resonates with me because it's very focused on when you tell somebody something that they don't necessarily see it at the right time. So you're scrolling through social media and there's one thing that sticks out and your thumb stops, and for 10 seconds you look at that thing and decide whether you're going to focus your attention more on that, or you're going to keep, as my kids do, scrolling at the speed of light, which I can't do. But if you don't see something that is relevant to you at the right time, you may skip over it. So let's just say it's like I'm reading a sentence and there's a spelling error in it, but my brain perceives that word to be spelled correctly. So if I'm reading something very quickly, I don't see it. It's only if I got spell check on and there's a red underline and I go, oh yeah, no, that's not spelled. Yeah, climate fresque is not spelled like that. But my brain might read it by mistake. So that's one thing. And then confirmation bias. So we are hardwired to see the world as we want it to be. So if you think about recent politics, you can see that there are two very strong sides to a lot of the situations that we're in, and people don't want to move or to look or to appreciate the other person's point of view. So we're hardwired to see something already as it is. So we go on to Google and we look for the things. I always do this, right? Let's say it's the fact that we can now charge cars along motorways, right? The plan is that we're going to be able to charge as we go. So you'll be able to move into the slow lane, and underneath the car there'll be this special thing, and I'm like, oh, that could be amazing. So I start looking it up. This is going to be brilliant. Like I'm start Googling, okay, companies that do this, countries that have implemented it, that. But what I don't see is, what's the carbon emissions of this? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? What's the, what's going to be is there going to be a big queue in the traffic because these cars will have to go slower to charge or whatever? I don't always look for the negative side or the other side of the story, because I'm only looking at how I'm going to make this work. And it's really good to maybe have a look and think about the other side of the coin. The next thing is trust. So business, according to the Edelman Trust Barometer for this year, business is most trusted to integrate innovations into society. This is key. It's not governments. This is not NGOs. This is business. So we see business as like, yeah, any business worth its salt is going to be the person the people who we really see as the front runners and able to implement all this AI coming through, all of the new rules and regulations, etc. And as businesses, we need to step up to the plate, really. So you have to be extremely careful with your comms about what you put out there and how you put it out. And I think that's a big thing when it comes to sustainability. Everyone's worried about greenwashing. The other thing is that we are hardwired to think, what's in it for me, right? What's in it for me if I cycle to meet my client? Well, I know what's in it for me because it gets me there quicker. I can literally just hook up outside. I don't need to park. I don't need to think about it. There's no emissions. It's like an absolute no-brainer. But we also think about it from the point of view of like, what's everybody else doing? The social norms. But we really trust our friends and neighbours. There was a recent study done in Ireland a couple of years ago, and they, along with Climate in the Irish Mind, we'll come on to in a minute, but they worked out that we don't trust governments and politicians, not unsurprisingly, right? We don't trust governments, politicians. No. We do trust business, but we also trust Bob down the road who's put the solar panels on his roof. And we go to Bob and we go, how much did it cost you? Do you get payback? Do you have a battery? How do you store it? Like, how much did it cost you? What was your grant? Right? We trust somebody else who's taken on, and particularly in an Irish context, We really do trust our peers. And then this is very important, and something that carbon literacy focus on very much in detail, is this peer-to-peer learning. Because of Bob down the road, etc., we learn from each other. We're learning from each other right now, and we're going to learn from each other in terms of the questions, and that's when all the magic happens. It's so important to make sure that in any communications that you make space for peer-to-peer learning and storytelling of maybe what Bob did with his solar panels or whatever, those kind of things. But you can't do it alone. Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. The masterful Steve Jobs. Very, very important to involve everybody rather than just going off on your mission and saying, okay, I'm going to put this out about, let's say in the office, we're going to have somebody to come in and do like clothing rental or something. Like, we've got a big party coming up. Maybe the ladies want to rent a dress to take to the party, whatever, rather than buying a new one. But you need everybody involved in that. You need marketing, you need logistics, you need to find out what the best time is. You definitely need to ask people what they'd like, when they'd like it, because otherwise you won't get the take up. And then lastly, how are we doing for time? Oh yeah, very good. Lastly, communication. So I think we talked about it at the top of the call, but tailoring your message is so important. You need to meet people where they are with your message, which is why you need to segment out your stakeholders and look at them in more detail. So 2 really good studies that have focused in on this. Climate Outreach, if you haven't looked at it, Climate Outreach in the UK have a ton of resources on this, and I really highly recommend looking at that because it can be tailored. Then in Ireland at the moment, we have Climate Change in the Irish Mind, which is a study that's been done over the last 2 or 3 years, which focuses on the attentions and beliefs of the Irish persona and how they think about climate change. And so then you can kind of like start to segment your market, not necessarily into senior and junior management teams, although that's important, or into supply chain, whatever, but into how these people potentially think about climate change, about sustainability, where it is as a priority for them. Climate Change in the Irish Mind focused that when you put a list of 9 priorities in front of people, when you ask them about climate change, oh my God, it's really important, we really need to do something, yada, yada. Then when you put it into, let's say the other things were housing, what else was it? Housing, and then, you know, government policies, all those health, all those other things, instead of coming first, climate change came last. So it's very much how you ask those questions, but also how you interpret the responses. So it's very key when you're looking at how to communicate with your audiences that you look at, like any marketeer would, you look at the audience and you say, okay, how do they look at the world, and how should we engage them on that? So Climate Outreach, for example, have broken down the UK into quite a few different segments, how people think about it, definitely from a political point of view, but also like under those headings, what values those people are likely to have, and so where we should appeal to them. Meet people where they are. So as I mentioned, peer-to-peer, really super duper important, but also the power of your story. So I think this is really important. So many people think, let's say it's Institute of Sustainability Studies, let's take the course, right? I'm going to do the course if I've just been tasked moving into sustainability as a role. No, you can take this course if you are not in a new role in sustainability, if you're outside of sustainability, you don't have to be working in sustainability. We need everybody, all voices from everywhere. So your story and your background as to how you came to care about the environment is so, so important. And I love this quote by Dan Eagleman. This was taken from the New York Times. It's not easy to infect the brain of another person with an idea. It can be accomplished only by hitting the small exposed hole in the system. For the brain, that hole is story shaped. Story not only sticks, but it mesmerizes. and you probably see this a lot in just general media at the moment, that telling a story is extremely powerful. And I think that's the narrative that is so important when it comes to climate change, sustainability, telling a story. So I always tell the story about how I cycle everywhere, but I pre-qualify people in saying, well, it wasn't something that I just decided I was going to do one day. I was already pre-qualified, right? I already knew that it was going to be better for me, better for the environment. I didn't just decide one day that I was going to do it, which for the majority of people who may or may not be able to cycle, right? That's the other thing. Can you cycle? Do you have to take public transport? Do you have to drive a car? So it's being inclusive for everyone, and really thinking about telling your story when it comes to talking to people and that messaging, and keeping it honest and truthful. Certainly when it comes to greenwashing, you just want to tell the absolute truth, because that's what people need to hear. Just to sum up, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So if we come together as a group, as a population, as a company, as a country, as a community group, whatever it is, we can achieve a lot. It is much harder to achieve stuff if you're battling by yourself. So involve all your stakeholders, bring them on the journey with you as much as is possible. I can't stress that enough. It's so important to bring people with you and ask their opinions, because that's when you get the gold of, you know, how somebody else thinks about it, you know, why they're not turning off the lights, why they're not doing certain things. You'll find out what the rub of the problem is. Where's the friction? So really focus on bringing everybody with you. So that's us for today. I hope there are some questions. Not sure how many people we have on the call. Nazia, welcome back.
Thanks, Sarah, for those insights. Yeah, you clearly put it out there that, you know, just effective stakeholder engagement and communication is not just supplementary to your sustainability efforts, but they're central to a company's success. I'll just see if we have any questions here, but I thought I'll get the ball rolling by quickly asking you around, you know, tailoring your messaging. You know, one of the key things that you spoke about. Could you just provide an example of any business, be it Irish or a global one, that have actually successfully tailored their messaging to drive home their sustainability message to their stakeholders and, you know, to their audiences?
Okay, so yeah, there's probably a few examples of where people really tripped up. But I guess brands that do it well, is there, it's so hard, because I think when there's a brand that does it well, there's nearly always a little hole that they forgot about. I think those that do it really well, and I'm probably very biased, but it's Tony Chocolonely's, right? Like they, you know, they bring the like the slave labor chocolate bar to Paddington Station, and they get people. So if you're not a Tony Chocolonely fan, or you don't know, haven't heard of them, their chocolate bars are not in equal squares, because they are focused on trying to get slave labor out of the chocolate supply chain. So how they communicate that is that they have the bar itself is in lots of different shapes and different parts, because it's not equal, like what the farmer gets, what the brand gets, all those pieces. And they really stick to some simple and clear messaging when it comes to their overall modus operandi. This is what we do. We're not saying we're trying to go organic. We'd love to do that, but that's another, you know, they're saying, right, this is what we're sticking with in terms of our message. So I love the things that they've done to try and get people involved in public places as well, where they can really get like first-hand responses and understanding as to how people feel about this. Is it on their to-do list? Yes, it would be nice if every chocolate bar was, you know, rainforest certified and actually didn't have any slave labor in their supply chain. All of those things, which customers are bound to say, but they really do dig deeper and find, okay, so but why is it the money? Why are you not buying the more sustainable bar? So yeah.
That's very interesting. I actually didn't know that backstory, so that's good to know. I think we've got a couple of messages just around how companies create the time and the bandwidth for employees to engage better. Um, just how do you navigate heavy airways when you're trying to communicate with your colleagues?
Yeah, I'm going to take you back to the Rumi quote, right? At first, I wanted to change the world, and then I looked at changing myself. We all know how busy we are, so that's how busy your colleagues are. And it's a bit like that, what does it Facebook say when they see like the dwell time of like, I don't know, 2 seconds on a post? That's like the most amazing success story ever, And like 10 years ago, we would never have considered that. We would have been like, oh, if the person actually clicks through, we would have thought that was success. But now it's a whole different paradigm and change. So think about it from your own point of view. You're sitting at your desk, you get an email through that's asking you to go on a litter cleanup, right? And you're thinking, okay, I really want to get out of here. It's a lovely sunny day. I'm not sure if that's what I really want to do with my colleagues. So you have to think about it from that point of view, right? How do I get these people to come with me on the litter pick? So do I incentivize them? And incentivization financially only goes so far. Really, it's what's in it for me. Am I going to have more exercise? Am I going to be able to, is the CEO going? Who's going to be there that maybe I want to chat to or I want to network with? Just think about it. If you think about it, what's in it for me and from yourself first, you'll probably come up with a better strategy than just, this is going to be a fabulous event. Let's all go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the whole concept or like the idea of transparency also comes in here, right? Like how transparent are you with your messaging, be it internally or what you're putting out there for your external stakeholders. You also mentioned just about how trusting governments and businesses is hard, but peer-to-peer learning is so important. But at the same time, we may still feel resistance to change. In that sense, in what ways can we address potential resistance or just skepticism from stakeholders who may not see immediate value in your sustainability efforts and initiatives? So how do you overcome that?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And something I'm actually working on a neuro leadership pathway for sustainability with a couple of colleagues, because I think that if you look at the inner development goals, you'll see the skills that we need to make these changes. So behavioral change, I gave the example of cycling, but behavioral change can be very tricky. So you just have to, again, you go back to yourself. How would if I was going to change something about myself, if I wanted to get fitter, if I wanted to eat healthier, if I wanted to do these things, or if I wanted to green my supply chain and need my etc. Or there's like, we'll boot you off if you're not compliant with us. But maybe you've only got one supplier and they are the only supplier in the island of Ireland and you don't have a choice, right? So you need them to come on board. That's when you do have to appeal. You have to think about, am I appealing to their ego? Am I appealing to, like, they could be the first one to be B Corp certified. They could be the first one to say we have a transparent supply chain. Can I get them to talk to Sarah about how to get a grant to do this? That's the other thing. Is like, okay, what options are out there to make this easier for people, and what's the friction? Always think about the friction. Why hasn't somebody done this before? And if it's time, then it's like, okay, I need to set up a webinar, come along for half an hour. We'll talk about what actually means, because most people just think it's too big. There's too much in this problem. I can't solve it by myself. And so therefore they just put it off. But if you start with little chunks, piece by piece, is how you get the momentum for really big change. So I would definitely start with smaller initiatives, I would say.
Okay, great. I think we'll wrap up with this question is just around effective methods for identifying and then prioritizing your stakeholders, right? Because not everyone can have sort of the same weightage in, your messaging or your brand development. So how does a company go ahead and say, okay, these stakeholders, matter to me more than the others? So how does that prioritization work And I know CSRD and the whole double materiality assessment is going to probably be a part of your answer, but maybe if we can just plug that into in your response.
Yeah, I think that is key, right? Like if you are going to need to start reporting on your scope 3 and you haven't yet looked at that at all, you're going to need to engage a whole lot of people that wasn't necessary before. And I think it depends on where you're at on your journey, right? So let's just say that you have done scope 1 and scope 2, and you've an idea, depending on what your business is, where the majority of your scope 3 is going to lie. So if you have already got that general idea, let's just say, I don't know, your chain of restaurants, it's probably in the provenance of the food, it might actually be in the transport. If you know where it is, if you look, I mean, this is a B Corp thing as well, but if you look at 80% of your spend in terms of suppliers and just take that chunk, never mind if the last 20% is, you know, like Billion Bob Limited, whatever, we'll get to them and it's coming for them as well. But that mid-tier spend where you spend most of your money, that's where you should focus. And the UNSDGs are great for that. Like, you know, looking at, okay, is it in Guatemala? Do we need to look at gender equality? Do we need to look at poverty? Do we need to look at, you know, try and make it relevant to the people that you're talking to? That's for sure it. So I don't know, did that answer it? Sort of went off.
Yes. I think it's just about, just, you know, how relevant they are to your business, right? So I think you can sort of benchmark that and, you know, get an idea of, okay, whom do you prioritize over others? So no, you did answer that. But I think with that, we'll wrap up. We're nearly there. Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And that was a very interesting session, and we had quite a few people joining us as well. So I'll just encourage everyone who's joined to keep an eye out on the ISS website and our LinkedIn channel for all future webinars and sessions that we'll be hosting. We'll bring back experts like Sarah to speak with you on issues of topical environmental and sustainability importance. And of course, do check out the ISS website for our sustainability courses. Enroll now for whichever interests you the most. And thank you so much, everyone. And a huge shout out to Sarah for her time. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing many of you join us for our next sessions. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the day.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.